Zion is one of the spokespeople for Extinction Rebellion, and she's going to tell us a little bit about how we come to be now and what's next. So Zion, over to you.
Hi. Oh, it's loud. Always feel a bit weird standing behind those. My name is Zion, and I gave up my job to go full-time with Extinction Rebellion once I realised how dire the situation that we're in is. But I'm actually not going to talk a lot about extinction because it's a lot to fit in 10 minutes, and I wanted to talk a bit about this idea of old and new power. So this is actually something that we talk about a lot in Extinction Rebellion, but I hadn't really come across these terms before. And something that we often say is so when we talk about things like a lot of the media attacks we have, or a lot of the attacks on, say, Greta, who's after all only a 16-year-old girl, well, not only, but it's kind of bizarre for a lot of kind of older people, especially men, attacking her. We've been talking about this sort of old and new paradigm clash. So I was really interested to hear about these ideas around old and new power, because this is sort of what we've been talking about anyway. And the more, when we sort of came into being, people were quite, the media was quite friendly towards us. And in the April Rebellion, we had a really nice, nice coverage. We were seen as kind of the friendly hippies, I think. And this time, the October Rebellion, it was very different. And it was a bit more like people have realised that we're not going away. People have realised that we're serious. And we maybe are, like Greta, coming across as a threat to people who are holding on to an old way of doing things, which we are saying has to go. This is basically what we say to everybody. It's in all our demands. That system is broken. Any system that could sleepwalk into the level of crisis we're in is broken. It doesn't serve anyone. It doesn't govern anyone. It serves a few individuals, and it's all got to go. This brings us to this. Actually, no, I'll do the demands later. Okay, so we don't exist in a bubble. We do stand on the shoulders of many movements that have come before us, and actually quite a lot of us have come from those movements. So there's people in Occupy. It's not one that I was involved in, but there's people who did press work for Occupy in our press team, and there's people from Rising Up. A lot of the founders were in an organisation called Rising Up. I was involved in Camp for Climate Action 10 years ago, which actually, interestingly, was doing really similar things, where it was decentralised, and it was we would target a different corporation every year. So one year we did RBS Bank because it was investing in tar sands and things like that. And the complete focus was civil disobedience. But we didn't have the tools that we have now. And also it wasn't really the right time. We were very much seen as eco-terrorists and very much treated that way as well by the press and by the public, I would say, the public response to us. Whereas now it was almost like the time was right. The IPCC report came out. It galvanized people. At the same time, around the world, Greta saw it and said, I'm not going to school anymore, I'm going to strike on her own outside with a placard. People from Extinction Rebellion, the co-founders who'd been discussing how to bring about change for some time, was suddenly just said, right, we now actually have to do something. We need a name, and we need to declare rebellion, and we need to go out in the streets and try and get people involved with this. So it had a kind of timing that we didn't have before. And that timing was really useful because it came off the back of the IPCC 1.5 warming report, which has a 99% scientific consensus. And this is very much at the core of everything that we say. When we get asked for, well, what should we do? Should we have renewables? Should we have nuclear? Well, we don't comment on any of that. What we're saying is listen to the experts because they know. We're not claiming that we know all of those things. We're just saying there are people who know. There are people who've studied these things for their entire lifetimes. Let's hand the power over to them and take the decisions from them. It's not even about us coming forward and giving. I mean, I have my own ideas, but what's to say that that's right? That would just be a similar sort of dictatorship type, situation as what we have at the moment. So this does come on to the third demand. Our third demand is that we want the government to create and be led by citizens' assemblies. And none of our demands have been met. But what's interesting is that there's progress on all of them anyway. So our first demand was for the government to declare a climate emergency, and it didn't, but Parliament did. And actually over half of the councils in the UK have declared an emergency, and they also are setting up citizens' assemblies overseen by people in the regional groups, which I'll go back to in a minute. So we use a couple of things that we have that things like Climate Camp didn't have. social media, definitely. And it's not that social media didn't exist before, but WhatsApp groups, oh my goodness, just say what, if you meet anyone from XR, just say WhatsApp groups. They'll probably scream and cry and hide in the corner, but they're so useful. And the first day that I joined, I mean, I was there for a while, but when I really committed, I said, look, I'm going to help. Throw me in. You know, I did to like 6 WhatsApp groups in a day. I had to mute them all straight away because you've just got people just constantly, but they're really useful because all the discussion and organising happens in them. And then we use Zoom as well, which I don't think existed actually 10 years ago, for our meetings, so that we can actually meet with people from all over, because, you know, very few of us are actually based in London. I think it's a bit of a misconception that we're all Londoners. We're really not. I mean, I live down in Devon. I do commute to and from London occasionally, but a lot of the work is done remotely. So we use a new system as well. It's called the self-organising system. It's not new, but it's new to this kind of activism, I think. And the best way to explain it is that there are different teams, which we call circles, and each team acts autonomously, so they act independently of each other. So someone asked me before the rebellion, what are the sites you're going to take and how are you going to do it? And I said, I don't even know, and I'm right in there, I'm right big cog in the machine, but that's decided by the actions and logistics team, and I will know when you know, because then they'll release information, and I don't have a say. I mean, I could join that team and have a say, but then I would be in too many teams, and there's quite a lot of work in the media team that I'm in. I'm in a couple of other teams as well, but there's actually a cap on how many teams you can be in, so that nobody can be in all of them, which really does speak to the fact that we are leaderless, which nobody ever believes, by the way. Been on so many TV shows and things and been asked, you know, if you do have leaders. We really don't. We might have people who lead on specific things, but we don't have overall leaders. And actually, someone said this to me on television about Roger Hallam, who's one of the co-founders and very visible person. And he was saying that he was a leader at the time of the rebellion, the October Rebellion, when actually Roger was sitting in prison. He didn't even come out on the streets. He was in prison because of his separate action, the Heathrow pause. And actually, that was really interesting how that panned out, because originally he proposed it in the actions, so he's in the actions and logistics team, and he proposed the Heathrow pause as an XR action, and actually quite a lot of people didn't want to do it. They didn't see it as non-violent because they saw drones as something that would scare people. You know, I don't necessarily personally feel that way, but quite a lot of people did. So we had to have quite a lot of discussions going back and forth, because, you know, we also have a principle, which is that if you do it non-violently and you follow our basic values and principles, you can do it in the name of Extinction Rebellion. So there was a lot of discussion. It was the first time this had happened, where there was kind of like, you know, there were 2 groups saying 2 different things, and there were lots of discussions until it came to the point where we decided it would be a separate action. And then Roger went off with a couple of other people from XR, but mostly it was about 30 people, and most of them weren't in Extinction Rebellion. And they called it the Heathrow pause, and they did it as a completely separate thing. And when we were asked about it, we just wouldn't comment. So we wouldn't say that we didn't agree with it either, because some of us did. But it became a completely separate thing. And that was the first time that happened. And a sort of similar thing happened with Canning Town, except it was announced and then the next day it happened. So there wasn't really time for that discussion to take place. But again, there were quite a lot of people who didn't want it to happen. And we're now looking at streamlining that process so that we're going to have coordinators from all groups collect information whenever that happens again, and quickly make a decision to represent people. Because actually what happened is someone set up an online poll. It was someone not in XR UK, it was just someone from a regional group. And the poll had something like 73% of people voting against the action. But actually we don't use a voting system, right? So it wasn't that exactly that those people ignored it and went ahead and did it. They weren't breaking any of the values and principles, and they don't have to listen to a voting system. Oh, I'm being told I have 2 minutes left. Or it's a peace sign, I can't tell. So the SOS system is really interesting because, there is a map. I was going to put it up there, but it's all a bit confusing. Oh, my slides aren't moving. No, it's fine because they're a bit random anyway. So there's different circles, and so we have a media circle, and I'm here in the media circle, and it has 3 coordinators. And then the media circle has a press team, and the press team deals with press releases and journalists, and they have 2 coordinators. And then we have a social media team, and they have 2 coordinators, and they deal with what are the hashtags, what's the messaging we're going to get out. They manage Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and all of that. And that's just the media team. And there's still more branches. Then there's the branch of the newspaper, which I helped to found, the Hourglass newspaper. There's free copies outside. And that's how every circle works. So I get asked about circles like the political circle. I couldn't even tell you, to be honest, what goes on there. It's very independent. You know, you could wipe a whole load of us out from one circle, but everything else would just carry on. And that's what it means to be decentralized. There really are no leaders. Yeah, skip that because we don't have time. So third demand, really important to get in quickly. This is where we really talk about changing the way the power structures work. So it's the Citizens' Assembly. It's quite a good model. It has a lot of data behind it. It was used in Ireland to overturn the abortion ban. I think there was about 99 people who deliberated for 2 weeks. They are a bit random. You don't have to look at them. Yeah, there's really good data behind it, and we really think it's a much truer form of democracy because you'd get a large group of people listening to evidence, like in a jury, listening to evidence, but they'd be listening to scientists and making decisions on energy, transport, agriculture, everything that needs deciding, because actually our government has failed to do it. They're not going to do a worse job than the government, who have done very little. And actually also there won't be that issue of, you know, in government where people really do want to make good changes and then there are so many barriers because of vested interests like the fossil fuel industry. They won't have that barrier. So that's actually something we're really pushing really heavily for. And in terms of solutions, that's our biggest one, is we say let people decide what the solutions are by listening to experts. So it's both of the things working together, is that we follow the science and we really believe in decentralization and mitigating for power. I'm going to end it because I know I'm out of time, but I will say separate to that, so what I'm talking about, the organisation is XR UK that I work in, but actually we also have the regional groups, and the regional groups are the groups that have lobbied their local councils to get them to declare climate emergencies, to set a net zero date. Some of them, they range from 2025 to 2050, and to set up citizens' assemblies. So that's even happened independently from us. We give them support and we put out literature, but we haven't told anyone to do that. They've gone ahead and done that themselves. So it almost doesn't even matter that the government has not agreed to that demand, because it's happening anyway. And the other thing that our model allows is the decentralization and adaptation model allows is change around the world. So in New York, they added a fourth demand to deal with some social justice issues that they experience over there. And in Brazil, they added a fourth demand, which they put as their first one above the first demand, tell the truth. And it's ecology and justice, and it asks for the rights of indigenous people in that country, which is just such an important thing for us to see. That it's because why would our demands in Britain suit everybody? It's really important that people do take them and adapt them. And then again, even if our movement completely crumbled, it will continue in other parts of the world where it's having a really powerful effect.